Hi, welcome back everyone to a new amazing video, which is a dependency injection Dagger Hilt tutorial video. So I thought about that I want to make a tutorial video for how to build the movies app that I talked about in the previous video. And so in that app I used Dagger Hilt, so I thought I'd first make a tutorial for that so you would understand what that is before I actually make a tutorial video for the movies app. So what is dependency injection? Dependency injection is a design pattern like repositories, as I already prepared this little repository thing with its implementation in an API. But dependency injection is just a design pattern that we can use to make our code cleaner and more efficient and saves us time basically. And what dependency injection is that providing an instance value for an object. So let's suppose an API that we want to use all across our app. We want to provide its value, so we can just get it in any view model or anywhere we want to use that. And the same if we want to provide a repository instance that we want to use all across our app or scoped in a certain activity. So if we want to make that instance live as long as an activity does, or as long as the entire app, or just a screen, just a fragment or activity, we can do that basically with Dagger Hilt. So let's understand now Dagger Hilt. Now in my Instagram page you can check it out. I already posted something about Dagger Hilt, and Dagger Hilt saves developers from encountering too much boilerplate code, because basically if you don't use dependency injection like I did in the Room database video, I needed to pass a DAO to the view model, and I needed to create the view model factory, and every time I have a different view model that needs that, I need to create that factory again, and that is very bad. But actually Dagger Hilt does that for us because it provides single instances for Room, retrofit, repository, or any type of object that we want to use across our app, or in a certain activity basically, or a fragment or a service. So in our project, let's now see how to do that. So in my view model, that takes a repository instance, and if I run the app everything would work fine, but I would create a view model factory in my main activity to pass that repository instance. But that's exactly what I don't want to do here. We want to use dependency injection to manage all our dependency. We want to Dagger Hilt to manage our dependencies for APIs or repositories or anything like node DAOs, or database DAOs, or anything we want it for. So to do that, let's create a new package actually, which is going to be called DI, or that stands for dependency injection. And inside here we will have a module. We can have different modules, of course we can have different modules. Now I'm going to create an app module. In the app module there will be dependencies that live as long as the app does, which is what we want to have usually, but not all the time. Sometimes we want just a dependency that lives as long as an activity or a service does. But inside our app module we're going to create an object now that is called, of course, app module, like this, and we'll annotate this with module that comes from Dagger. Actually I forgot to talk about the libraries or dependencies we need for this app. We need Dagger Hilt and we need retrofit just to create a fake API call. So let's check this. We have this little fake API, and we need, as I said, Dagger Hilt and Ktor, which is Kotlin annotation process, because Dagger Hilt uses annotations and generates code behind the scenes, the same as actually retrofit. And we need to, of course, add that right here, the plugin, and this one right here. And also in my root Gradle package we need this plugin, and just add these. You can find the project in the description. I will link it of course on GitHub, and just paste these and sync, and you're good to go. So in my app module I want to annotate this now with install in. So install in singleton component class. So what this means is that this module will live as long as the app. So we will have a single instance of this module. So all over our app, we will keep using the same exact instance of this. We can also have activity component. So where is it? That comes from Dagger. This is it, Dagger. This will give me a module that lives as long as an activity, or for example a service component that lives of course as long as a service. In this case we would just want to use the singleton one that lives as long as the app, especially for APIs, because we may want to make API calls from different places in our app. That's why we want to have a single instance of that API and its repository implementation, so we could just access it from anywhere we want in our app, from any view model basically. Now we want to provide now this API. We want to tell Dagger Hilt how to provide it, so that whenever we want to use it, Dagger Hilt will find the right value for that object or for this API, and then gives us that instance we want. So we will annotate. Now we'll create a function that will annotate with provides, and then we'll annotate it with singleton, and this will be a fun provides API, and this will return API for me. Oh yes, let's just I actually called it some API. So you may say, what is the difference now between this singleton and this singleton component? As I said, the singleton components means that these dependencies that I will provide here will live as long as the app, and this one means basically the number of instances we want to have for this. If we say singleton, which means anytime we need this API, anytime we want to make an API call and we need to access this API, then we will keep using the same instance because we have a single instance of that. We'll keep using the same instance. But if I don't annotate this with singleton, then every time I want to access this, then Dagger Hilt will give me a different instance or a new instance. You know, it will generate for me a new instance for this. But in my case, I'm okay with a single instance, so I will annotate it with singleton, and then we'll tell Dagger Hilt now how my API is going to look like. So we'll return, of course, our retrofit builder. That's how we can now make it. So retrofit dot builder like this, and then we give it a base URL. Let's just say HTTPS and / or whatever those called. So some API.com. This is now the base URL. This is just a fake API. We're not going to make any real API call. .build.create and our API. So some API class.java. So now we tell Dagger Hilt how our API is going to look like, and every time we want it, then it will return for me a single instance that is created using these configurations that I specified here. Now we want to of course provide the repository, because in my view model in which I am going to make my API call, I want the repository, and that repository of course implementation needs the API. So I need to provide now the repository for my view model. Now I'm just providing the API for my implementation, and then I'm going to provide the repository for the view model. So right here we'll copy the same two annotations because we need them again. So provide and singleton fun provide the repository. And that will return my repository. This will return the implementation basically. So what did I call it? A repository implementation. And of course this needs API. So how do I get now the API? Just by of course passing it to this function. So API of some API. But actually we won't call this function. So we won't call this provide function and then pass in this API to it. No, we won't call neither of these two functions. Dagger Hilt will do that for us. Dagger Hilt will call them, and then it will see that this function or this implementation needs this API, but where is this API? How do we create an instance for this API? Then it will start searching for it, and it will find that we already provided that API right here. So whatever this function returns, then that's exactly what we're going to pass to this function that's going to pass to the repository implementation. So that's how now we can provide the API and the repository. The repository for what? For our view model. But you might say we still need to create the view model factory for this view model and then pass the repository. But actually no, we don't have to do that. I mean, that needs to be done, but by Dagger Hilt, not by us, because it saves us from writing too much the boilerplate code. So we just need to annotate this with Hilt view model, and then Dagger Hilt will know that this view model needs this repository. Where is this repository? It will go to the app module. It finds this repository right here, which needs this API. Where is this API? It is right here. So we can now inject this dependency, which is the repository, to the view model. But we just need to tell Dagger Hilt, or to just inject the constructor. So inject constructor. This is needed now to tell Dagger Hilt that this is now the constructor and these are the dependencies we need. So Dagger Hilt will just inject them for us. Now in my main activity, I need to create now an instance of this view model so I can use it basically. So to create that, we just say main view model is a Hilt view model. So we don't need to create now a view model factory, and that is type main view model. So this is now how we can create a view model with Dagger Hilt. But this Hilt view model needs something which is annotating my main activity with entry point. We annotate any we could say thing that come from the Underwood framework, like activities, fragments, services. All of these needs to be annotated with Underwood entry points. So we annotate this with Underwood entry points, and then we create an instance of our view model which will get this repository that will make our API call, and then we will print right here make API call. But this will still not work. We need to create an application class for our app. So app that will inherit from application, the constructor, and then we need to tell Dagger Hilt that this is our application class. So we just write Underwood Hilt Underwood app, this one. So now Dagger Hilt will know that this is our application. If we want to use that for anything, basically, actually the app won't even work without this. And then we need to register that API, that application. So name app, and we'll add the internet permission for retrofit. So user permission internet, like this. And I guess let's just see. I guess this is it. Let's just now run the app and hope this actually works. So let's run this. Now in my logcat, let's see if the app works or it crashes or whatever is going on. No, it doesn't crash, and I made my API call successfully. So I just now passed all the dependencies and inject them to where they are actually needed. But now let's suppose we have more than one implementation for this repository. So let's actually create that. Let's just, if we happen to have a second API, for example, that's called the second API, and then a second implementation for my repository that needs now the second API, so no, not the first API, and makes the second API call. How do we provide that? So you might you might think, you come here, you copy this provide function of the first implementation that will provide the second repository with the second API, and let's import that we need this one, the second implementation. That's what we want here. And let's say even this one is the second one, this one is the second one, and then we provide now our second API So API2 that provides API2, and let's say we have a different API like test, and API2 here as well. So this is how you might think we can do that. Now in my view model, you just actually create the second one, this is API2, and make the second API call with the repository to just like that. That's how you might think we can now provide the second implementation, but there is one problem here. These two actually return the same instance, the same type, but how would Dagger Hilt would know which one is which? So actually let's run the app and see what's going on here. So you can see we get an error which says repository is bound multiple times, because this is the same instance. Dagger Hilt doesn't care about what is returned, but it's the same instance, even if the implementation of the repository differs. So how do we fix this? How we can create two different implementations for the same instance? For example, if we want to return this, like a function that returns two strings, I mean a function that returns a string and another one returns a different string, then that's the same instance. How now do we solve this problem? By naming now these instances, by each one giving it like a unique name. So annotate this with named, and let's say API 1, and the second one is for API 2. So named API 2 like this. So now we make them actually unique, but still the view model doesn't know which one is which. So we do the same here, named, and that is API 1, and the second one is named API 2. Actually the first one is 1. So now we tell our view model or Dagger Hilt that here we want the first one that is named API 1, and the second one here is named API 2 that we get from our app module. So let's run the app and see now if we can print both the API calls, because now I'm trying to print two different API calls. Let's wait, and yes, I make the API call, the first one, and then the second API call. Now let's suppose in our implementation we want the application context here to actually get a string resource, for example. So let's say private var application, that is application, and then we want to use that to print or to get some string resource. So application.getString r, which one, because we have different ones here. This is it, .string.appName, for example. Just create some space here, and actually we need to also pass that from my app module here. So just right here I now say application is application, and there application like this, and I don't actually have to do anything else because I already told Dagger Hilt that this is my application, and now it knows what the application is and it will inject that to my repository implementation. So let's see if everything is fine. And yes, here is my app name and there is the API call. This is how we can provide now repositories or dependencies for our app and use them all across the app basically. But there is a different way of providing these repositories. If we check the movies app, as you can see here, I don't actually use the provides, but I use bind, because what I have in my, let's just close this. What I have in my DI package, I have two actually modules. One for app module that provides all the databases and API calls, or I mean APIs that I need. And then a repository module that provides all the repositories. That's actually a better way, or a recommended way of providing repositories, even though the first way is also fine and working, but a better way for separating things, like only having a module for repositories and another one other things, for other dependencies basically. Now let's do that. Let's create a repository module. Like this, and this needs to be now an abstract class. And we'll do the same by annotating this with module and singleton. I mean install in singleton component class like this. Let's create some space so you could see it better. Now right here we need to annotate this with the functions that now provide this, but now we don't provide, but we bind actually. So binds that comes from Dagger Hilt and singleton again. So the same if we don't want to create repositories that live as long as the app does, we don't annotate this with singleton, but we want to do that here. And then named again, because we have two different implementations. So let's say API 1, and this will be an abstract function that binds repository 1. And this will take now the implementation, so repository implementation, and it will return repository simply. This is it. Now we just bind the first one. Let's copy this and do the same with the second one. So 2 right here, 2 and implementation number 2. You could also name this one 2. And yes, we can now delete the first two provided functions that provided the repositories. But now actually my implementations still need this API, and this one is the API in the application, and I don't pass that from here. I just make the bind function take that as a parameter. So how do I pass them? By doing the same as we did with the view model, which is injecting the constructor. That's simply how we can do it. So right here, inject constructor, and with the second one, inject the constructor, and this is it. Now we bind the two repositories implementations that we have. So let's run this and hope for the best. Hopefully this works. Well, it should work. It is working. So this is the first API call, the second one with the application. So this is actually Dagger Hilt. As I said, it's just for providing objects with their instance values, and Dagger Hilt does that for us by having these modules. We can have a lot of more modules in our app if we want that. Like if a feature has a set of like repositories that, for example, that only feature calls a room database, and like from that feature only, then we can have repositories that only live as long as that activity if we have that inside an activity, or just a module for only that feature. So we can have different ones. Now what we are going to do is using this in a real project, because I'm just right now explaining how this would look like, or how this works, because actually this does work. But I'm going to go for to the room database app that we've created in a previous video that didn't use dependency injection, and will make it use dependency injection. So this is actually my room database app. As you can see, I created the view model factory and I initialized database in here, but we don't want to do this now. What I'm going to do is convert this or make this use dependency injection with Dagger Hilt. The first thing we want is to paste the dependencies we need. So in the Gradle file, app Gradle file, we just paste, oops, I already have them here. I already pasted them. I guess I already have capped and Dagger Hilt. I already have everything basically. These are the dependencies we need. Dagger Hilt and this capped and Dagger Hilt as well right here. So just sign this when you paste them. And now let's start creating our app module. So let's just close all of these. And in my root package, I'm going to create a new package, which is the dependency injection one, so DI. And then I'll have an app module inside that, which is going to be, of course, an object module. Or you know what, let's first see this app, how it looks like actually, before even doing anything, so you could just see what we are working on. Let's wait for it to build. It is launching. So this is the app. I already have some things in here. I can add some notes. Basically, I can save it, I can delete notes, I can sort notes. So this is how the app looks like. We can just delete everything to have a fresh start next time. So let's now create our app module. So app module that add that, so let's just not add anything. Object, and annotate this. I don't know what's going on, but annotate this with module, and then with install in singleton components, like this. Now inside my object, let's just create space. Inside my app module, I'm going to provide, because I don't actually have repositories, but it's going to be the same exact thing if you want to have repositories. Now I'm only going to provide the database now. So provides and singleton fun provides actually database, that's what I'm going to call it. That needs an application because Room database needs application. So app application like this, and it will return the node database that I've already created. This is it. So node database, and then we'll return room dot database builder, and that will take application, and then the node database class, node database class.java, and the name of the database, so nodes.db, and then .build. So this is it. Now we build our, or we create an instance for our database, and then we want to use this all across the app, but as actually this needs the application, so let's create that right here. App console, actually applications should start with a capital letter. App, annotate this with hilt, and with app, and this will inherit from application because we use application right here, and Dagger Hilt needs to know the application. So in my manifest, I need just to register the application name app like this. So we need the constructor here. Now in my view model, we have one view model in the app. This is it. That takes a DAO, and the DAO, we can, instead of just passing the DAO from the activity like this, what we are going to do is saying that our DAO is actually now passing the database itself. So let's just delete this and say node database, and now let's create our DAO. So private var DAO is node database.dao. So basically we've already created an instance of this database, and then Hilt will inject this to this view model, and then from that we will take, or we'll get our DAO, but we need to annotate this with Hilt view, Hilt view model, yes, Hilt view model, and then inject the constructor, inject constructor. So yes, this is it. Now in my main activity, I don't need all of this garbage. I'm just going to delete this and annotate this with underwidth entry point. So underwidth entry point, and then create an instance of my view model. So var view model is Hilt view model. That is type, what was that? Notes view model. So notes view model, and I guess this is it. Hopefully this is it. Actually, let's just run the app and hope it works. Just have this one open here if we have any errors, but we don't seem to have any errors. It does compile, but does it work? Now let's try adding some notes here. So something, just anything, and here as well something, a third note. So I have my notes. If I close the app and I run it again, will I get my notes? Yes, I get them. I can sort, I can delete a note, and the app is working now with dependency injection. So this is actually, for this video, we learned what dependency injection with Dagger Hilt is and how it helps us make our code cleaner and more efficient, basically. So Dagger Hilt or dependency injection is just a design pattern like repositories and any other design pattern that we would use in our app. Don't forget to check my Instagram account and follow me there. I post useful, underweight, and general programming content there. So see you in another video, and bye.